Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are now on Chapter 4, which covers the sales process, both for off plan sales and secondary sales. So, first, who can buy or sell? The minimum age is 21, and there is no need to be a resident of the UAE. Brokers need to be aware if the client is mentally capable and they have evidence that they are financially capable of buying. So, we don't want to discriminate against different clients. However, we also might be liable if we sell a property or buy a property on behalf of somebody who is not aware of what is going on. Minors can also buy or sell property. So, to buy, they must have the signature of their legal guardian, and to sell, they not only need the signature of the legal guardian but also a court order. This will protect the funds that are received from the sale so that it will be held in trust until the minor is of age. And if the legal guardian will need to use the money from the sale to take care of the child, the court will need to approve of that as well. So, money laundering is something that brokers need to be aware of. The real estate sector is a major target for money laundering. Large amounts of money can be deposited into real estate, and the real estate is a usable asset. So, it's a great target, and brokers might encounter actual criminals on a daily basis, and it is our responsibility to not help a criminal in their activities. So, one of the consequences to helping somebody with money laundering is that it can affect the market performance because sometimes these transactions may occur at prices way above or way below market value. So, our responsibilities are to refuse to serve a customer who appears to be engaged in laundering or highly criminal activities. We can also help deter money laundering by accepting deposit checks in the form of a personal check and not allowing the transaction to be in all cash. So the government released a video on YouTube which discusses all the red flags for money laundering. I just paraphrased some of their terms. And of course, you don't want to refuse to sell to somebody just because they meet one of these terms. However, if somebody has multiple red flags, um, not only are they a potential criminal, but also they're just not a good client. So let me read them out. One is if they refuse to provide personal information that is usually required, if they purchase without appearing to have adequate assets or knowledge of what they are purchasing, if their company or contact information does not exist or is similar to an existing company, a dupe, if they have a high number of beneficiaries or have a corporate structure that doesn't make sense, if they are willing to pay above market price, if they attempt to hurry up paperwork, if they have large sums of cash, if they are linked to somebody who is known for criminal activity, if they have counterfeit paperwork, and if their only purpose appears to be capital investment. So, as you can see, these are things that might tip off a broker for just being odd, for just being a client that might be very difficult to work with and satisfy. So, of course, you should be considering that they could be a money laundering um, uh, bag man, or they just simply aren't a good client. So this is something to keep in mind and is actually rather serious. And on to purchasing. So before we get into some of the nitty gritty, let's talk about different ways that you can purchase a property. Rent to own is a great option for home buyers who want to take a mortgage, but they don't have the money for a down payment. So they can pay the down payment in a period of 3 to 4 years. And during that time, they are treated as tenants. They have an ijari and a tenancy contract. This is great, except they may not have as much of a negotiation advantage with the seller as another client who might be able to pay the down payment all at once. It's all up to the buyer what they prefer. Ijara is lease to own, So instead of just the down payment amount, they actually will cover the entire purchase price by contract for 7 to 10 years. This contract will be bound by an MOU or Memorandum of Understanding. And again, they may not be able to negotiate for a very attractive price, but it doesn't mean that they're going to pay above market value. This could be a great option also for many people. Delayed sale is a special payment schedule that is agreed between the buyer and seller. In this situation, the title deed will not be issued until all the payments are complete. A random fact that I encountered in my Rera exam, and I don't know where else to put it, is that in commercial properties, warehouses have a registration fee of 10 dirhams per square meter. So have fun memorizing that. So, for off plan sales, how does it begin? A buyer is interested in purchasing a home for themselves, or an investor is looking for a great project to invest and potentially gain some capital in the future and rental in the future. So, they might engage a broker to teach them about the projects that would satisfy their needs, or they can go directly to the developer's office themselves and get the information on that project, and go to another office and do the same thing, get information on that project, and so on and so forth. So if they engage the resources of a broker, they could save a lot of wasted energy and a lot of extra knowledge that they don't really need to pay attention to, because the broker's entire job is to learn the projects and to educate the buyers on the ones that are relevant to them. So the broker can help them in this way. When they make a purchase, they are only paying the price of that property, including some other fees that I'm going to outline soon. But they are not going to be paying commission to their broker or even the developer's broker. All of that commission money is managed by the developer. They will release the commission to the brokerage to pay the broker, and they will release the commission to their own agents. So, this is something that a lot of buyers get confused. They think that if they hire a broker, that they could be subjecting themselves to extra fees, but that's not true. All the commission is completely out of the hands of the buyer, and it's mainly just to help them succeed in the best way possible. I know that many times when I've tried to explain this to buyers, they don't believe me because I am a broker, and they think that, of course, you would say that. But no, I am teaching this course and I'm telling you that that is the truth. If a broker does ask you for commission, they are doing something illegal. They do not get commission from you for off plan sales. Also, off plan is basically referring to projects that are not completed yet. Usually they sell out pretty quickly, so when you are purchasing at the very beginning stages of construction. At the time that you are purchasing, usually what's there is almost nothing. Very early stage construction, maybe even the entire community looks like just desert sand. Once the construction is complete in either a year or 5 years from now, um, it will be completely different. And the amount that the property will be worth will be increased because they would have gained value from the community becoming fully mature. You're purchasing the property before it reaches maturity, and therefore you could be making some money. And that's why off plan is a great option for investors. So that's step one, to get into the developer's office and find a project that you like. Now, once you find a project that you like and you found a unit that you like, you will pay an initial booking. So this usually is 2 to 5% of the price of the property, and this is typically non-refundable. You also will fill out a booking form. So during this stage, you should have your property information written out clearly, and be able to access this in the future, because you don't want to get to a point where you are faced with the SBA and the property that is listed on the SBA is different from the one that you thought that you were purchasing. It's going to be a lot harder to go back and say, no, that's not what I wanted, and the one that you wanted is no longer available. So best practice is to get in writing what you want in the beginning when you're paying your booking deposit. And then you will make a check for down payment. This tends to be 10 to 20% of the purchase price, and this is deposited when the ownership is transferred. After that, you will sign an SPA. So the SPA is quite a long and detailed document, and it's very important to understand and read it thoroughly. During this process, you also will be paying a 4% fee to the DLD. This is a registration that you will also pay even if you're buying in the secondary market. So it's not related to the to a charge that the developer is giving you. But sometimes developers can waive the DLD fees as a special way to entice buyers. Um, and after the SPA is signed and everybody is happy, you will eventually have an OCUD, which is a pre-title deed or an interim agreement. So this OCUD will allow you to resell the property. It's proof that you are the one who owns this property until the title deed is finally ready. So the title deed will be ready after a few things happen. First of all, your unit is ready for handover, and then you will pay your final installment, and you will visit the apartment and or property, and you will take a look around, and this process is called snagging. So during this process you can see if there is any major issues with your unit or even minor issues. You might decide that that's not exactly what was listed on the SPA. There are some defects, there is some wiring problems. These need to be fixed before you finally hand the unit over to me. Um, in this stage, you might discover that the unit is not the same size as originally promised, and those terms can be sorted out with some of the language written in the SPA. So I have another slide for that, and I'll just get into that later. So after snagging is complete, then you will wait another few weeks for those repairs to be made, and then you can get the title deed transferred to you. There are some title deed registration fees, and then that's it. You finally own this property. The moment that you receive your handover and the title deed is yours, you are then liable to pay service charges, and after that, you can do whatever you want with the property. So, SPA, or Sales and Purchase Agreement. This is a long contract that you most certainly do not want to skim. Okay, so it will list the purchase price. It will have technical details of the property, including the size, floor plan, view, and parking spaces. It will have some personal details of the developer, of the borrower, let's say the bank for mortgage, a lawyer, and contact information. It will also outline the payment plan, which is usually a schedule that is linked to either time or stages of construction. Then it would also have the anticipated completion date. So the SPA will also highlight terms on how you can terminate the contract between you and the developer, penalties for not being able to make your payments, or penalties from the developer side for not being able to deliver the project on time. It also will outline what you can do if if the size is not what they or like if they don't deliver what you were expecting to deliver. It can also outline how you can terminate mutually the contract between you and the developer. The SPA will indicate a lot of these very important um, legal terms that can affect you down the line. So it's going to be valid for a few years until you get your unit handed over. So make sure that you read and understand it very, very clearly. You can, at this point, decide that you can't make an agreement with the developer, that you do not agree with the SPA, or maybe you change your mind, you don't want to buy it anymore, you don't have to sign the SPA. But you will not get your booking fee refunded. You can get your down payment returned to you, but you will not keep all the money that you originally spent, which is just your booking deposit. So, in terms of cancellation, you have a 30 days grace period. Again, this is listed in the SPA specifically, but usually it is 30 days, and any party can initiate the cancellation. So here are some examples of an SBA cancellation if the buyer fails to make payments. So this is the default in case that the language is not explicitly written in the SBA. Usually the language will match what's written here. So if the construction hasn't begun and the developer is not at fault, the developer can keep up to 30% of the purchase price. The remaining amount will be refunded to the buyer. If less than 60% of the construction is completed, the developer can keep up to 25% of the purchase price, and the remaining will be refunded to the buyer. If more than 60% of the project is completed, the developer can keep up to 40% of the purchase price. So there is a chance that this would be on the Rera exam. You might have to memorize this. Yep. Now, if the developer fails to hand over by anticipated completion date, the buyer has to make sure that they have met their obligations, because they can't go to the courts and say the developer failed to meet their obligations, but the buyer themselves failed to meet their obligations. You have to make sure that if your payments are behind, that you make all the last payments up till the date that you are going to make this complaint, and then you can seek a cancellation based on the terms in the SPA. So the SPA will also outline how much of a grace period is allowed. Sometimes it's written that up to 12 months of delay is allowed. So that's another reason why reading the SPA carefully is very important. Typically, the buyer can get a refund of everything plus interest. The standard is a 9% interest. If the unit size is different, um, the the grace the grace margin is about 5%. They claim that 5% is not enough to see a noticeable change to the property from what you were promised. Um, this is true for all the examples I gave, but you can resolve the situation with the developer before engaging with the courts. Um, and yeah, you are entitled to compensation. Sometimes the unit might be larger and maybe you don't want to get compensation. Maybe you're very happy that the unit is larger, but you can still engage the courts in this scenario. And I mentioned before earlier a mutual agreement. This is called equala. In this situation, both parties will part ways as if nothing had happened. Let's pretend this never happened. They both are restored to their original conditions. And usually this is based on a clause in the SPA. Here is an example of an investor who got a refund from a project that is off plan. So there was a time that Dubai launched its new tallest tower, which attracted a lot of investment. However, that project was officially canceled. So some investors felt duped and they wanted to get their money back, and they succeeded. The way this article is written, saying, oh, but they lost $30,000 in the process, I feel like that's kind of incendiary. That's probably just the booking fee, or the booking fee plus DLD fees. Anyway, here we are looking at Okud, which is Arabic for contract. This has been in place since 2013, and this is key to digitization and key to solving a lot of the previous problems in the real estate sector. So, the DLD registration is done on the Okud portal, where an Okud certificate is issued. This is to promote efficiency and transparency. Developers can access a full record of customers and properties. Buyers are protected from fraudulent projects, being sold the same unit repeatedly, or false information about a previous owner on that unit. So that's pretty critical, because there was a time that some developers were so shady that they were willing to sell the same unit again and again, and they would just sign multiple SBAs with each buyer, but there's no proof that they actually own that unit until the title deed is furnished at the end at handover. But at that point, the developer is long gone. So the OCUD is an electronic tracking method, and this protects both developers and buyers, and it's a win-win all around. So OCUD is also a document that you must have if you want to sell your property. You can sell it before handover. A no objection certificate is something that I've discussed in the previous chapter, but basically it's a letter that you can receive from the developer that just proves that you've paid all your service charges and there's nothing outstanding. You will need an NOC if you sell your unit after you've received it. Um, and this is the format. So you have a date, letterhead, and some contact information. I, the developer, am not opposed to you purchasing the property from me, and I certify that the transfer of ownership is possible and that there are no outstanding payments due. So the NOC is valid for 7 to 15 days. And usually it's not, you actually have to pay for the NOC. Some developers charge up to 5,000 dirhams for it. So you need to be careful of when you request the NOC because of the expiry. But officially, the NOC actually shouldn't cost anything. So here is title deed. The title deed is the official proof that you own a document, and it is recorded in the DLD and on Dubai Rest. To do the title deed transfer, to register the title deed, you will be paying 4,000 dirhams if the property is less than 500,000 dirhams, and you will be paying 8,000 dirhams if the property costs more than 500,000 dirhams. The title deed tends to have the same information for every property. So it will have a description of the property, such as the type, size, and location. It will have a description of the owner, the name and ID, as well as the most recent transfer date, the issue date, the purchase price. So the title deed is one of the only sources of the actual purchase price. And the title deed might also mention restrictions on selling or purchasing. Finally, it will have a seal of the deeds registry office on it. Now, moving on to secondary sales. I am aware that I might have actually been talking too quickly. I have the luxury of recording this for YouTube, but um, definitely if this was an in-person session, I will probably stop here and make sure that if anybody has questions, that they can ask me now, and I can go back and discuss anything that wasn't clear the first time around. So if you are watching on YouTube, which you are watching on YouTube, because that's the only place where I'm putting this, um, certainly leave me a comment if something didn't make sense to you, and I will try my best to explain to you in the comments as well. The best part about YouTube is that you can rewind and go back and re-listen to some parts. So make sure you do that as well. So now for secondary sales. The first step is that a property owner will contact a broker. The broker will need to know a few things. What kind of buyer do you prefer? Do you prefer a cash buyer? Do you prefer somebody who's going to move in very soon? These type of things that tend to be more relevant to the seller, and that way you can find a buyer that the seller is not likely to reject. Sometimes the seller has more specific requirements, like I want somebody who is a couple and a small family. I want somebody of this nationality and race. And it is their right to say that, although I don't see how it can really make a difference in the transaction. Of course, it's important to log all the information that they are able to provide you. You can also get from them at this stage property information such as the size, view, number of bedrooms, is the property mortgaged, what was the original price, is the property freehold, how many parking spaces do you have, and very importantly, you should verify the owner by their title deed. There is a QR code that you can use to verify if the title deed is a real title deed. And now for the seller, they need to know about you. What are you going to do with their property? Are you going to list it, and where? How are you going to market the property? What kind of photos and videos are you going to use? What kind of experience do you have? Of course, a new broker should always have a chance among the experienced ones, but experienced ones will certainly have an advantage in the sense that they might have already a large pool of people in which they are looking on behalf of for property. Maybe they are experienced in this area for a long time and they know the ins and outs. So a history of what they have sold and a plan of action will certainly help the seller gain some confidence in you. The seller will definitely want to see your license to practice, so your broker card, and that is basically going to be your BRN or ORN that they can Google. They can search you up on Dubai Rest. So finally, at this stage, in the beginning stage, it's important to let them know what are all the costs that they can expect, because it's going to be a very bad surprise if somebody is new to this process and they weren't expecting to spend this much. They are finding new charges being stacked on top of them, and that's going to help them to lose trust in you. Now, exclusive broker. What is that? So that means that you are the only broker who is allowed to sell the property for the seller. The seller can engage another broker, or the seller can just find a buyer directly, but because you have an exclusive agreement with the seller, you will always receive commission. So this process will protect both the seller and broker in a few different ways. One of them is that the broker is not afraid of competition. They will just share the information about the property. They don't have to worry about giving too much detail so that other brokers might be able to poach the landlord and just be able to list the property on their own. They will contact the landlord with the information given and say, hey, I'm also selling in this area. Can you give me this listing as well? So brokers are more free with the information, and they are more helpful in that way. Brokers are also more incentivized to work on the listing. So if you are listing the property and many other brokers are listing the property, it's hard to prioritize this property because it's very likely that no matter how much work you do, another broker will close before you. It's also more likely that the listing price will be accurate, okay, both based on the CMA, which is the comparable market analysis, and the landlord's wishes. So if the landlord gives the listing to multiple brokers, sometimes the brokers can list a fake price, a price that will help them stand out, and it's going to help to lose trust. I know that I just said this twice, help to lose trust. That's a little bit confusing, but it's going to make it more difficult to believe the listings if they are not listing a real price. If the price is too high or too low, it's going to be um, it's going to clutter the portals. So this is something that, of course, brokers should be able to help on their own. They shouldn't have to misrepresent. That's a breach of the code of conduct. But sometimes brokers feel like they have to do that in response to competition. Um, as well, the landlord will not have to deal with multiple people. Why would they prefer to get calls from multiple brokers over multiple requests constantly through the day? It's better to just get the request filtered through one broker. So, since October of 2022, the maximum number of brokers is now 3. This is a huge improvement because there was a time that sometimes 20 different brokers can list one property, and that makes the portals extremely cluttered. So, in this way, 3 brokers is still not too many brokers. 3 brokers is still a reasonable amount of brokers. Of course, 1 broker to 1 property is the ideal scenario for a broker, but the seller is the one who makes the decision at the end of the day. Now, the broker can initiate contract A after they have an agreement with the seller to be one of their brokers or an exclusive broker. Contract A is available on the Dubai Rest app for the broker, and they will need from the landlord the following information: their passport or Emirates ID, the title deed, what are the service charges, what is the selling price, how much is the commission in percent or in dollars, some information about the property, is there an existing tenancy contract, and there is an option in the contract A to fill in an NOC, but it's not necessary at this stage. And here is also where the broker will indicate if they are exclusive or not. So the seller has a responsibility during this process, which is to correct their information if it's not correct. So here's the information on where you can go to fix your information with Dubai Land. You can either email info@dubailand.gov.ae, or you can contact the Dubai Land hotline at 971-800-4488. Sometimes the seller doesn't want to do this. They can write an NOC letter for the broker to do this on their behalf. And I mentioned this in part 2, where if the broker puts in incorrect information on behalf of the seller, there are some legal implications to that. Next, for contract A, the seller will need to approve of the contract by phone or email. They can reject if they want. And now that the broker has a copy of contract A, they can use this as a digital place to store all the important information related to this project. It is available on Dubai Rest. It's also downloadable in PDF format. The password is usually the contract date. Pop quiz. So, question. By default, how many days is contract A valid? What is the maximum period and what is the minimum period? By law, is the commission 2% from the seller? Can a broker change owner information on contract A? Must the seller have an Emirates ID? So I'll give you some time to think about what kind of answers you have. Either if you are experienced, you will definitely know most of these answers. And if you're not experienced, I've just asked some very difficult questions. So the answer to the first question is, how many days is contract A valid? By default, there is 60 days on contract A. The maximum period is 1 year, and the minimum period is 1 day. By law, is the commission 2% from the seller? No. By law, there is no commission specified. Brokers might even receive no commission from a deal. Brokers can receive 5% commission, 50% commission. They can receive any amount of commission. It is on agreement between the broker and the seller. The common practice is for 2%, and usually that is what happens in the market. Can a broker change the owner information on contract A? No, unless they have NOC. So technically, yes, you can change the information, but officially the answer is no, unless you have NOC. Must the seller have an Emirates ID? No. You don't have to be a resident of the UAE or have an ID. You don't even need to be in the country. Now, finding a buyer. So there's two ways that you can find a buyer. Either a buyer will contact a broker to help them to find the home of their dreams, or the buyer will contact the seller's broker through a property listing on the portals. So, in either scenario, the buyer and broker will form an agreement with contract B, which is also available on the Dubai Rest app. And contract B will not have as much information as contract A. There will be some information on the buyer, personal information. It will also ask for the budget, the location, amount commission, and any termination conditions for their agreement. So the buyer can terminate contract B unilaterally with the broker, or the seller can terminate contract A unilaterally with the broker. Both of them can do this with Form U, which is available on Dubai Rest. Um, so sad for the broker, but it is their right. Form I is an agent to agent agreement. So this is for a situation where the broker for the buyer and broker for the seller are different, and this is their agreement to work together to the best interest of both parties. Sometimes there are multiple agents on the buyer side or the seller side. There is any number of split of agents in this scenario. So Form I is there to protect the brokerages and protect the agents, and it's provided by the brokerages to protect the agents. So Form I will have both the agents' information, which includes the BRN, ORN, and brokerage contact information. It will also have special terms on termination conditions, specific terms on termination conditions. They will also specify the commission split between the agents. There will be property information and buyer information. Now, finally, the most important part is Contract F, also known as a Memorandum of Understanding or MOU. So, in order to initiate a contract F, you will need a contract A. So, usually, a contract F is initiated by the seller's broker because the seller's broker is the one who completed contract A. The contract F will be signed at the registration trustee's office in the presence of a witness, which is usually the agent. Contract F is going to be in English and in Arabic, and since Arabic is the official language, if there's any discrepancy between the English and Arabic versions, then the Arabic will prevail. All parties are going to sign the document, and you will have the date of the signature, parties' names, address, contact information, laws, rights, and responsibilities, all defined on Contract F. Contract F can be canceled. It can't be done unilaterally, and there will be a penalty of around 10%. So, in order to complete the MOU, often the seller will have to put in a 10% deposit. This way, we can avoid something from happening, which is called gazumping or gazundering. Gazumping is where the seller can get a better deal from another buyer, and gazundering is where a buyer can find a better deal from another seller. So the reason why you would still cancel contract F, even though you will lose money, is because the better deal is better than even the 10% penalty. So it does happen. It's not ideal, but it's good to keep in mind that these things certainly happen, and there is very little you can do as a broker. It is mainly the decision of the seller or the buyer at this time. So I've discussed and defined POA, except there is one more thing to mention in terms of secondary sales, which is that if the broker is listed as a POA, they cannot be listed as the broker in the contract F. So that means they will forfeit their commission. This will count as a conflict of interest. So in this case, the broker is not always entitled to commission. And this was one of the practice questions in the previous section. Is the broker always entitled to commission? No, they are not. Finally, I will leave you with this Venn diagram that I hope might clarify for some people what is contract A, B, F, Form U, Form I, what these things are, who they pertain to. So I know that my slide design has been pretty poor throughout this entire course, but as far as I can tell, I think this Venn diagram is really straightforward. Okay, so between the broker and seller, we have a contract A. We also have Form U. Form U can be initiated unilaterally by the seller, but it involves their relationship with the broker. For the broker, between brokers, there is Form I, also known as the agent to agent agreement. Between the broker and the buyer, there is a contract B. And there is also Form U. This can be initiated unilaterally by the buyer, but it affects the relationship between the buyer and the broker. And between the buyer and the seller, there is Contract F. So both brokers or the one broker can be listed in Contract F, but the Contract F has two main parties involved, which are the buyer and seller. The registration trustee is part of this Venn diagram, kind of on the outside. They are in charge of being the ones who the buyer and seller will approach to sign the contract. The broker can be there as a witness, but the registration trustee is involved when we get to the stage of Contract F. So that is all for this course. Sorry, not for this course, for this chapter. And the next one will be on the leasing process, and I look forward to seeing you there. I hope I didn't go too fast. Certainly leave me any questions in the comment section here, and I will do my best to answer.